All right. So we were just talking about some K-drama stuff. Can you share what you were watching recently that made you think about the topic we want to talk about today?
Yeah. I recently watched a Korean drama. I think it's a very famous drama right now. At least it's going out in the Korean community.
Yep.
It's called When Life Gives You Tangerines. And the whole story in a nutshell is about a mother. She's basically young in the story as it begins, and then she has a mother, and it's just a story in, like, I think it's around the 60s of her growing up and a lot of the problems and setbacks that she had, and then of her having her own family, and it kind of like spans on through several decades of like her story with her own daughter, and then the daughter story as well. And I think what was really interesting is I think, as you know, from we have immigrant parents, and just seeing the story of like their story, a little bit more insight on their own story, and kind of like how much they sacrificed, and how much in this story the mom like her mom, this is way back in the day, sacrificed for her, and then how she sacrificed also for her daughter to live a better life, and so on and so forth, right? That's kind of like the cycle that's going on. And I think what was interesting is that we are living the cycle of like we're living a really great life. And yet sometimes we forget that our parents worked really hard, suffered through a lot to get us to this place, to live a much better life than they did.
Yes.
So I think that's the interesting, part about this whole drama series right now.
Yeah, so I'll share a little bit about like my childhood. So I came over, so I went to Hawaii. That was like my, immigration thing with my parents in 95. I was born in 86. So when I watch dramas like that, a lot of the way the buildings look or the signs or the clothes that people wore, that really reminds me of my childhood. And the thing that we always learned in school was that like we just came from this war, right? 1950, like our parents were born right after the war, the Korean War.
Yeah.
I mean, we went through so much that the greeting in Korean is like, did you eat yet? Because people didn't have food, right?
Yeah.
So to go from that to then through so many things, the IMF crisis in the 90s and all that stuff, to finally becoming, you see the Hyundais and the Samsungs and all these symbols of success. But yes, I do think a lot about our parents, especially after becoming a dad as well.
I think we honestly lived in different worlds. And I think that difference is the gap is so large that it's hard to empathize with each other and our experiences, because they really lived in a third world back in the day. But then we've rapidly grew as a country, right? Like we just became this, superpower. We're like number one in K-pop and number one in, like we got Samsung, we have all these incredible cars. It just grew so much that we don't live in the same world. We grew up in America. We don't know the struggle with food. I don't know about you, but food wasn't really a struggle. Where in this drama, there's like scenes of where this girl literally doesn't have rice. Like they're at their last scoop of rice, and then this old couple runs in, hides, and puts more rice in their bowl. Like they lived through that. And so when we get so angry with our parents, like, why are you overfeeding? It's just because they didn't have food.
Yeah, they're
right?
hardwired. Yeah. I mean, it's funny that we say, hey, we got to fast now. We got to stay away from the food that we already have to be healthy. And that was like, they were just, it is truly a different reality. And one of the things that I think about a lot that we kind of had a mini heated conversation about is, yes, we look at things through different lenses. And one of the things is when we start to engage with our parents, sometimes it's so amazing how quickly I get from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
Like sometimes my wife is just looking at me as I'm rising up over the dinner table and like yelling at my mom.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, why am I like this? You know, I mean, I know you've had experiences like that.
And we all have. See that? I think that's the thing. That's why I want to talk about this, because I'm going to be the first. I'm not here to, honestly, guys, I'm not here to fake it. I'm not here to like act like a perfect son. I want to be super real, especially in our podcast, talk about real problems. And I will say, I struggle with my parents. You know, I struggle with being kind to my parents. And here's the thing. The kicker is that I know you guys do as well. So this is a universal thing. I'm sure it's not everybody.
Yeah. No, I think it's universal.
It's pretty universal. Yeah. I think it more particularly pertains to the immigrant to the, you know, Korean Americans or Asian Americans now. I think there is something there, and that's why I want to talk about it. I'm going to be super vulnerable. I'll be honest. Like I do get 0 to 100 with my parents. And for me, I'm such a obsessive like researcher on why I act a certain way. Why do I do this? And so I can change my environment so I can modify my behavior to not act in a certain way. With my wife, I feel like it's been way easier. With anybody else, I used to deal with like the hardest people. I used to work with homeless people for over a decade, you know? But for some reason, with my parents, it's like, that is my kryptonite. I struggle so much to be just, you know, nice and gentle. Sometimes I see some kids that are so gentle with their parents and so like kind, and I'm like, man, how do I do that?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, so where do you think that comes from? I mean, maybe general to specific. Like what do most people, what are their experiences?
Yeah, you know, I had to do some research on this because I truly want to understand like what's causing this kind of behavior, what's causing this emotional rise in us. And I think there's several. Obviously, it's always multifaceted. So number one, we have zero filters with our parents, right? We are 100% ourselves. That's what we've habituated for many, many years, right? We don't have to be a certain someone. Yeah. They knew who we are. They understand us.
They saw you naked, running around.
They saw my thing, right? And so, like, how much more exposed can you be? And I think over time, because as we're going through our teenage years, we've habituated being frustrated with our parents. You know, like it's just been a habit over time of, you know, just constantly like getting mad, and we're trying to find our independence. And so there's that. I think one of the other things is that we have a lot of trauma with our parents, like emotional baggage with our parents. Again, this I think applies to everybody, like of all races, but I think for us with immigrants, like immigrant parents, they have their own baggage. Like our parents have a lot of baggage themselves.
Oh yeah.
And also they also lived in a society where they just want to survive. They want to just provide for us, have food on the table. They didn't have all the knowledge of being this perfect parent. And, you know, we have Emily Roster Oster, and we have all these gurus, Dr. Who's the marriage guy? Why am I blanking?
Yeah, we just covered him like 4 podcasts ago.
It'll come back to me. But
John Gottman, right?
John Gottman.
Yes,
John Gottman.
yes.
Thank you. But it's like we have all these things, and I think they were just surviving. We got a lot of emotional baggage. I feel like sometimes our parents forget that. They only remember the good things. Maybe they're just getting older, but and so sometimes even my parents like why are you so upset? Why are you? But it's like I remember, you know, the victim always remembers, you know, and so I think that's why it's like boom, we can get so angry.
I think just being aware of that fact helps me a lot. You know, we constantly talk about it is different. We have tools and things that they've never had.
Yeah.
really just had to work, get whatever jobs, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever it took to really get out of that. I mean, people who emigrated, right, to the U.S. There's so much that they didn't have time or resources to work on, like the emotional side, the things that we have the luxury of knowing, like through the people that you said. And what I really have to work on is how to be aware of that impulse and just be, just try to talk myself through it, because I see it in my kids. Like, I've told them something so many times that my youngest Leo, I was trying to call him at a theme park that we were just at last week. And I know he heard me. And I said, Leo. And then he like looked at me and he like, did a 180-degree turn and just like marched away. And I think it's like, oh, wow, I already see what I might do to my parents from my kid, right?
Interesting.
So I'm like, oh, wow, the cycle is already, how am I going to deal with this with my kids? And I think you're right. We do have zero filters. We have a lot of pass-through trauma as well. And some people that have trauma don't realize that it's passing through them to the next generation, because they're used to feeling or acting a certain way, right? And I think that some trauma can be used, for good. Like, there's a reason why, frankly, a lot of Asian people are successful, right? There's a very high level of, okay, we came to this country, we need to achieve, we need to do well in school. But some of it does pass through us. And I think a lot about that as a parent these days.
It's like multiple questions that comes up where I'm curious, because now, your kid is like, they're starting to become older, and now you're starting to interact with them as, like young, soon to be adults.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah.
And so I guess one thing that I've always wondered for myself, because my kid's really young, it's like, as you get older and you start seeing certain behaviors from your kids and how you're interacting with them, do you start and be honest about this? Like, are you starting to be more empathetic towards your parents?
Oh,
are you starting
100%.
to really understand?
100%.
And so does then your demeanor with your parents then start to soften as your kids get older, and it's like, oh, I was a punk. Oh, this and that. What do you think?
For sure. I mean, just to go back to what I was saying, it's like, as I start to get loud when I talk to my mom, I'm like, oh, I'm getting loud. Like, why am I getting so loud? Because she said something, and then I'm like backtracking it. Okay, I felt this way. I'm aware of it. Like, I'm like half standing up or whatever. My wife is looking at me a little bit like, hey, we talked about this.
Clam down.
She's like,
clam down.
I'm like, oh, so she did this, and then da-da-da-da-da. And then I kind of source. And sometimes you're in it emotionally. You just got to walk away, take a deep breather, whatever. But I am aware. And it does help me to realize that for me personally, just to be vulnerable here, I think what it is, doing like my own self-analysis, I think what it is I see patterns in my mom, right? And I'll say my mom because I've only mostly spent time with her, because it was just me and my mom that came to the States. When I observe my mom do something that I don't like in myself, I think I get triggered more.
Interesting.
That's what I've noticed in the past, I guess, recent years. It's like, oh, she does this, and I don't really like that part of myself, or I'm trying to distance myself from it, or I'm working on it, whatever, it looks like. That's one of the triggers for me, is like, why is it so easy to rile me up when people could be doing all sorts of crazy things to me outside in the real world, and I don't really get fazed, right?
You really don't. Like, you're such a calm person, typically.
I mean, we get yelled at all the time. It's like, you've worked with homeless people. I mean, but yeah, I don't know. Do you have something that you've maybe localized and pinpointed as to this is the thing that I get triggered by the most?
Triggered by, I would say, I mean, I can tell you specifics, like when it comes to like money. I can tell you, I can tell you something that honestly I think is a real thing that a lot of people struggle with. I think as men, so this is boys. I don't know how girls feel about this. I'm sure they also have struggle with this, but there's this thing where we want to be autonomous. We want to be our own person. We want our own thoughts. We want our own decisions that aren't criticized, because our parents do criticize our decisions quite a lot. I don't know about you, but there's a lot of, especially the Asian parents, like they want to break down everything that you're doing, and they don't want to acknowledge when you do things right.
Oh man.
Am I right? And so one thing that I've realized is that, at least this is my breakdown. Again, I'm going to be completely, there's no filters right now. I'm just saying whatever. I think
you can cry if you want to.
I think it's on some level, my mom wants some kind of dependence from me.
Oh man, here we go.
There's because I believe that she struggles with security because of her past, which I'm not going to go. Whatever, I'll just go through it. Her father basically abandoned the family, and I think she has definitely hurts around that. She had to grow up like trying, like again, that what does that do to you? That makes you want to, stand out or reach out for security or get security in some way. And so I know that's a big part of her. And I think that comes to the sons. I think a lot of mothers actually do this to their sons, where they want this kind of connection, this deeper connection, and where we want autonomy, especially as we're going into college, we're going post-college, working. We want like, no, I am my own man. Mom just, again, we call it in Korean chansori, right? So like our moms keep giving us that, complaining and that criticism, and it's just blah, 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 blah. It's just constant like yapping, right, in our ears.
Yeah, it does add up.
But then for us, we want that autonomy. We're like, no, Mom, I want to be my own self. I want to make my own decisions.
Sure.
But then there's that fight, like, no, I still want that hand, that control in your life. And then we're also trying to fight it. And so for me personally, that's something that I struggle with my mom, and also my dad as well. It's like my dad also has his own opinions and things like that. And what I've realized, at least for me, is that I need to just do my own thing, despite their. So when I say despite, I'm not saying that I'm not going to consider their wisdom. I'm not going to hear them out. And yet, despite whatever they say, I have to make my own decisions, because that's what adulthood is. It's making my own decisions. I think it then grows as you get a wife, you leave your parents and you start your own family. And I think that's where it's like, okay, now this is my family. I think parents, I don't know about you, but maybe they start slowly over time, especially when you get your own kids, they start slowly like, okay, maybe he could do his own thing. But I do know that was a big struggle as I grew up.
I have a lot of stories that are coming.
I could see it. Your brains.
I'll share one. I guess I'll share two things. So the first thing is, this is like really bringing back the childhood, because I grew up in Korea, right? Like we had to like recite in front of the class. We were singing in front of the class. They put you on the spot. They do all these tests. I had to learn the Chinese characters and get like tested. The education and the culture in Asia is just different. One of the things that kids in Asia learn a lot of, simply because of the culture, is how important your parents are. Yes. Right? Like I was told as a young, like 6-7 years old, that a man sheds tears 3 times in his life. Okay? First is for your country.
Oh, dang.
Dude, yeah. First is for your country. Okay. Second is for your, I think, teachers. And the third is for your parents. That is it. So like you're linking, like, so, and then we talk about how like your teachers are your second set of parents at school. I mean, that's where, the respect comes from, right? I'm not saying all teachers are the best or they don't abuse kids. Another side topic, but then you kind of learn, okay, how that you kind of put your parents up on a pedestal, and that's how I grew up. And I think culturally, America is just at a different place. I think it used to be like that, right? Yeah. It was all sirs and ma'ams and, all that stuff. And maybe in the South is still like that. But so then there is that deep rooted connection that we are taught to have with our parents. And then I think there's an allowance of like, I need to kind of listen to this nagging. I need to, because this is my parents. My parents are like here, nation, teachers and parents.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like you kind of get, I guess, indoctrinated in a way to be like, okay. And then, but when that piles up, that chansori, that nagging, when the parents don't check themselves or teachers don't check themselves, that's where I think it kind of goes this way versus this way. It's like, okay, I've internalized too much of this criticism, and I'm not doing well in society, or I have like a really critical inner voice. I know you talked about using that as a guiding voice. Maybe not everybody's there yet, but that's like kind of identifying that. So I'll share one funny story. So I left my house I left my house for the first time at 18 because I had a friend whose dad just bought a condo, and I hope some kids are watching this. My friend's dad bought a condo, and he said, you guys can all rent there. Oh, great. No lease agreement, nothing. We just all moved in with the stuff on our back. Peace out, Mom. My mom calls me a few days later at like 1 a.m. It's true story. 1 a.m. I'm like, and I'm studying or partying, I'm doing something, right? And I pick up the phone, and it's like she's crying. My mom is crying. She's like, "You left me alone. You left me behind." And
wait, did she know? Did you just leave, or
like? I mean, as much as a 18-year-old son would be, okay, Mom, I'm moving out. Yeah. And she was crying, and I was like, what is going on? I feel like I broke up with somebody, So anyway, just to share that story, there definitely is a different level of, at least in our culture, like the connection to your parents.
Yeah.
And I just got reminded of that story. So.
And I do believe in family values. I do believe that we should, stay connected with our parents. All that baggage that you've had in the past, hopefully you can get past it and you can continue staying connected. But when does that become unhealthy? When does that connection, okay, now I'm going to get crazy. Yep. When does that connection become unhealthy? When now your wife is involved or your husband's involved with your parents-in-law.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Oh, here we go.
The lights are so bright, I can't see. You see what I'm saying? I think that's where a lot of couples post-marriage start to really struggle.
Yeah.
Is that I still, like parents are like, I still want my control over you. But then the spouse, whether it's the husband or the wives, are like, this is not going to work for me. Like this can't work for me anymore. Something needs to change. And that's something that I've heard over and over and over again. The question is like, what is healthy here?
So I lived with both my parents and my in-laws. And I'm sorry, Jessica, but
no filter.
Like we had my in-laws into our house, and it was a 3-bedroom house with like 4 people. It just was, and a dog, right? 1,500 square foot. Whatever. And it got to a point where, because I said it was okay, because I'm trying to be a husband. Oh, yeah, it's okay. And I got to a point where, like, I did not have any personal space. Because I want to be the guy walking around in my house without pants on. You know what I mean? It's my house.
Sure. Get that. And
I had to come in and I had to sneak around. I lost my spot on the couch in front of the TV.
Yeah.
Al Bundy, like I want to be, I lost it. Yeah. So I'm like sneaking around in my own home, and it was just, I never knew how, anyway, that did that for like a month or two. And I kindly asked, maybe not kindly, but I said, Jessica, it's time for your parents to move out, right? And my mom lived with us before she found a home, and it was for 8 months. And I was actually going crazy. I was coming to a breaking point. We were making offers on these different homes. But that kind of reminds me of the topic that I think you're pretty well versed in, which is, again, boundaries. So for people who are listening, how do you offer some of that advice? Like, this is real stuff, right? How do people navigate boundaries with parents?
Yeah, I mean, I read a book. I'm not like an expert here. I just want to be very clear.
Oh, you are an expert.
I'm an expert. John Gottman learned from me when it comes to this stuff. I think a lot of us struggle with boundaries with our parents.
Yeah.
And I read a book on boundaries, and that book really helped me understand that it's okay to actually have boundaries. I think parents, especially in the Asian American culture, I'm sure this is universal at the end of the day, but especially with us, they want their hands on you still. They still see you. I'm sure you're always going to see your kids as their age, right? Even though they're 75 years old. Right?
It's so sad. It's so sad.
Right, but you have this thing where it's like you're so used to, again, habits, right? These habits are 30, 40-year habits. And so it's hard to break those habits. They want their control on you. They feel like their thoughts, their chanzori, right? The criticism, they feel like it's really, really like that's what's made you the person that you are. But then that really doesn't work when you're trying to be your own person. And so I think that I think there's a lot of overstepping of parents' boundaries on their kids. I think when they become a certain age, and I don't know what that age is, right? Some people think it's 18. Some people think it's 25. Some people think, some parents are like, no, until you're like 50, you're still under my, my watch. And I think that's where parents need to work on, okay, we have to let them be autonomous, because I have seen many times where parents are too controlling, too critical, too on their kids, and their kids become like, they don't know what to do in life. Sure, they don't know how to do life because their parents did everything for them. Paternalism. Avoid paternalism. What is paternalism? It's avoiding doing something for someone in which they could do themselves. I learned that.
Yeah.
I learned that for homeless people. Like I used to do everything. I used to get them, food. I used to get them, hotels. I used to, they used to have questions like easy stuff that they 100% can do themselves. I used to do those things for them until I read a book called When Helping Hurts. And I started realizing, oh, that's actually hurting them, not helping them. And I think parents need to learn how to just be like, okay, let them make mistakes. When your kid makes a mistake, you want them to learn from their mistakes. Like my kid falls all the time. Rather than being like, oh, and just trying to pick them up all the time, I'm like, no, you figure this out. Sometimes I he's about to fall, and I know it's not going to be a big fall, but I let him fall, feel the pain. He cries about it.
Right.
But I do that because it's like, no, that's the consequences of your actions, and that's the way life works. So I think there's a certain point where you could train them. But then once they become a man, once they become an adult, that's when you really have to come from a advisory standpoint rather than a, I'm your boss mentality. I am your authority, because you're not. You have to step back and be like, no, you now have to do your own thing. So I think just the last thing I'll say is I think when it comes to, because the dynamic I see is, okay, so parent, like blood parent to child, then they get married, and then they want that same kind of dynamic, that control dynamic with that child, But then the spouse is like, no, we are our own thing. I think one of the things that then this couple has to do with their parents is to set those boundaries, which I feel like Rebecca does really well with my parents. But it's like, no, like I have boundaries here. And I believe for the most part, the blood kid needs to be the one talking to their parents directly.
Right.
Right. Rather than this person talking to them. Because I've seen where there are some kids who are just like, they don't know how to like deal with their parents. They just try to either avoid them or they try to, they just don't want to like avoid that conflict because they're just used to that. Very strong personalities for parents and they want to avoid that. But you have to man up or if you're a woman, it could be different. Someone has to step up and just be like, hey, parents, this is not okay. And I believe most of the time it's the blood child.
Do you mind sharing a boundary that you had to set?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me one. Give us one.
Absolutely.
And show us kind of like how it played out.
This is going to sound ridiculous, but in the spirit of...
It's going to sound crazy, but...
One of the boundaries... Oh, man, there's multiple.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, which one do it? Okay, so... Okay.
You can do two if you want.
Well, this one I feel like is pretty... Any parents I feel like would know this. When you have a certain thing that you're doing with your kids, like a certain protocol.
Oh,
right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Come on now. Tell me, are you...
Do we have time?
Yeah. So, but really, it's like you have a situation where you have a certain protocol. In our situation, it's like, don't overfeed our kids.
Sure.
Right? That's a thing. My mom loves feeding. Like when I say loves feeding, she looks at me while I'm eating and she chews and she got nothing in her mouth. You know what I'm saying?
She's full off of your image.
They always say they're full without even eating.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
My mom legit is like that. And so she just loves watching us eat. And one thing that she did with me is she like overfed me when I was young. She would constantly be like, Tomogo, would just eat more.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm so full. And we now know that, that's not good for us. We're not supposed to overeat.
Right.
That's going to spike our blood sugar, which is causing, vascular damage and et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
When because we tell her, hey, please don't overfeed our kid because my kid doesn't stop eating, loves food, has no end. But she just keeps, I've seen them like just keep like an orange would feed like 2 or 3 oranges. And that's a lot of sugar, or like would just keep feeding them. And that's when we're watching, right? And so I think they did get better. And so I don't want to say they're like, horrible at this, but it's like, that was one of the boundaries where we had to say, hey, like, we want to trust you as parents when we're not looking. We want to leave and enjoy our date night and trust you, but it's like some of these behaviors are making it difficult for us to trust you when we're alone because we don't want this dynamic. So I would say that's one of the things.
Is that how? Can you pretend I'm your mom? So I'm feeding. I'm not doing something you want me to do. Like, what does that conversation look like? What do you say? Because I want to know.
You don't want. Hey, I don't want to.
Are you doing the sandwich? Like, what are you doing?
Well, what's funny is Rebecca's such an honest person that a lot of the times it doesn't come out right for me, and it comes out right for Rebecca because she doesn't have that emotional baggage. But she's also like, Rebecca's actually really good at that talking to my parents. She loves them. She wants to have a good relationship with them. And so she's always been that person who wants to call someone out of love so they can retain a good relationship. I think when it comes to your kids, because you love your kids so much, it can get, again, 0 to 1,000 so fast because you care so much about your kids. But I think for me, it's like I'm not perfect at this, and I want to be completely honest. I have to really let my emotions be controlled and really be practical in how I'm going to approach my parents, because I know that if I just let go based off of my feelings, I'm just going to go 0 to 1,000 and just get really like be shouting at my parents. And that's one thing that I really don't want to do. So I have to be really intentional about it.
So do you approach her and say, like, obviously there's a first, second, third try, right? Hey, I just noticed that this is happening. We feel this way about this.
Yeah.
Can you, again, oh, hey, I noticed again. I saw this again. I know you probably had good intentions, right? And then what does that conversation look like to draw that final boundary? Is it like, because I wonder, right? Because like people deal with this. I deal with it. So do you kind of use the relationship as leverage? Like, what do you? I just want to talk about this one thing, and because I think people might find it useful, because they're probably dealing with some boundary issue with their parents right now.
Yeah.
Right. Like for me, it's been screen time. Because we all know social media in general is not good, blah, 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 blah. But sometimes they have no plans. Like my mom, when she watches, our kids, she used to be a teacher. So she kind of has like this, and then when they go over to my in-laws, I have nothing but love and respect for them, but they just don't know what to do. They can't like create a program, so they're like, they're getting upset. Boom, the TV's on. They're watching some BS thing that I didn't want them to watch. So like, what does that final conversation look like when it really comes to that limit to your parents? You throw the table and then...
Jesus threw tables. So
okay, guys. So yeah, you can throw a table.
Yeah, throw a table. No, I actually, I don't know the answer to this. And yet I do have thoughts around this. At least this is like kind of where my head's at.
Sure, yeah.
Boundaries. There's a certain point where it's like, okay, it's now the 50th time. Right? There's a certain point where there's like, okay, no, now we have to have a change. Mm-hmm. Like there's actually got to be a change in our dynamics. I don't know if people agree with me. I don't know if this is right, but there's a certain point where it's like, oh, okay, well, you keep showing screen time or you keep overfeeding my kid. We're going to have to then spend less time with you. Yeah. And I know that's, some people might hear that and be you're horrible.
Well, I did the same thing. So, yeah.
Right. It's like, there's a certain point where it's like, we had an agreement. We keep breaking the agreement. Okay, let's just take this, the next step. Let's just say my mother was an alcoholic. She doesn't drink, but I'm just saying.
Sure.
Okay, let's just say she's an alcoholic. Sure. She gets, every time we gather, she throws back a fifth and she gets really drunk. She gets belligerent. She screams at everyone, right? When we say, okay, when we have gatherings, when you're around the kids, we don't drink.
Right.
Okay. She says, yes. Okay. Now it's the 30th time where it's like you're continuing to drink, be belligerent, and you're hurting our kids. You're hurting our, image of you, everything. Where's that point where you have to be like, okay, now I'm just letting you know, if you keep doing this, this is what's going to happen. Regardless if it's my parents or not, I've actually done this with people in my life where it's like, okay, you have to do this, and that for us to like continue being in this situation, like on the same team, right? For our business, you have to do this, and that. We clearly had an agreement. He did not follow the agreement. And I said, okay, well, we talked about this. We're going to part ways now. And that's happened multiple times. Do I regret it? No, I don't. Because I gave them the chance to do this. Well, we can't make the choices for them. They have to make that choice of, okay, I'm going to change my behavior to continue to enjoy this benefit of this relationship. So again, like that's just kind of my philosophy, where it's like there's a certain point where you just got to draw the line and be like, sorry, this is this, oh man, I don't want to say this word, but it's like,
say it.
There's an ultimatum.
Now
right?
You gotta say it.
It's like, when do you get to that point where you're like, there's an ultimatum of, okay, you're choosing to, let's just take kids out of it. It's like, you're choosing to continue to bash and criticize my spouse. and you're continuing to bring down my spouse and be mean to them. So in this drama, actually, the husband's mom was very mean to the daughter because she wasn't rich, came from a poor family.
Classic story,
right? And so, and I know a lot of people deal with that with parents-in-law who are just so bad to them, right? When is there a point where like, hey, I just, for our sanity's sake, for our marriage sake, for my sake with children, we need to back away from this relationship because I just can't continue to be in a relationship where it's abusive, and that's going to affect my relationship with my husband or my wife and also my children because it's affecting me emotionally. But what do you think?
I mean I've done the same thing, right? Yeah. So I smile with empathy because I know what that looks like. And I have struggled with boundaries. And the thing is, at a certain point, it's about what you're willing to take or not take. And because I'm typically a very laid back person, but when it comes to my kids, I'm not. And I am tougher on them than most parents probably are. We try to make sure they eat the right things. We're taking away plastic, and they just linked apparently BPA and plastic to autism. I just read that article. Me and Jessica were talking about it. It's like, oh, okay. So I'm glad we have stainless steel and glass and da. And then you have your kind of routine, and it's all researched and it's figured out. And then your parents could represent like a deviation from that routine. Like, man,
like every once in a while, right?
Sure. Yeah. And then if it happens, like you said, 10 times, 20 times, we have gotten to a point where, okay, I'll give you the specific example, right?
Here we go.
Like TV. I don't care. It's more about quality than quantity for me. Yes, I'm that dad. That's like, let's watch the National Geographic, right? I'm like, what? Because I used to think when I was younger, why is my dad so into these lions? And now I'm into it, and I'm like, I want to instill, like a wonder for nature and beauty, and okay, we're gonna watch this, and you can watch this. And I gave him. There's actually a really cool network that just came out that is really pro children, called Bent Key, like a key that's bent key. The Daily Wire is a team of like political pundits. You've heard of Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
It's a thing. They basically curate, whether you agree with those guys' messages or not, this service curates the right kind of content. In my belief, that kids should be watching things like, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood type stuff, right? Learning about morals and values. So we turn on all these things, and then when they go to, my in-laws' house, it's kind of like crazy. They're just watching whatever. They're scrolling through YouTube, and that's a rabbit hole that I don't want them to have control over. So finally got to a point where we heard that, our youngest kid turned on the TV at like 6 a.m. He just woke up, got out of bed, he just turned on the TV and was just like scrolling through. Mm-hmm. And it's like, hey guys, let's make sure, even if that happens, you can take away the control, right? Because he's 3 years old. You can just do this.
Yeah.
And then it didn't happen again. So we basically stopped like the sleepovers. We said we can only do dinners, but no sleepovers. So like we did have to back away. And it was a very painful thing because this is my wife's parents now.
Yeah.
So I don't want there to be a rebound effect where I go too hard and too critical and then she thinks less of me. But it's like, hey, do you agree with me on this boundary? She said yes. Okay, now let's execute. And then we have more leverage. They kind of follow our thing. And if they don't, well, we just have to limit the relationship dynamic to this because I know this works, right? Yeah. We can hang out, but maybe no sleepovers. If we have TV time from 10 to 12, they can come over because it's TV time anyway. Like just kind of roll with the punches there. But I do agree 100% that boundaries are very essential. And you have to do them even if it hurts because for the long-term benefit.
You really do. And you never know. I think for me, it's like maybe 40, 60% 40%, they actually do change their behavior. Once you set that really hard boundary and you're like, hey, we cannot continue on this path. I am not willing to continue to, let this affect me like, this, or let this affect my family. This is how it's going to be. And then when you do that, they may end up ending up in change, being like, you know what, this is painful. I don't want to, have this happen to me. Let's now change behavior. And I've had to actually do that many times with my parents, even before I got married, where it's like, no, I want this kind of autonomy, or I cannot handle this certain kind of behavior. And you guys need to stop doing this. And I had to like set some really hard boundaries on that.
Yeah.
And so, and I know, like, I actually like look at who watches our stuff, and there are people who are not married, right, and who are single, but still need to make sure that they have those boundaries with their parents. And you got to start now. In my opinion, I think you should work on your finances now, learn how to budget now, and also you got to work on that healthy dynamic with your parents now before you end up getting married. Because if you don't do that, then in marriage, when those boundaries are just, so loose, that's when the real big problems are, because now you have another person on the line, or you have another person and kids on the line. So
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we talked about is very real, and it's happening every day, for you and me. And I think it is you have to stand up to your parents, right? And be brave in that respect. Now you're not the kid anymore, right? Now you have your own voice, you have your own boundaries, you have your own opinions, and you have to treat, because your parents are going to be your parents until they're not, until they pass. And the time that we have is so short. There's people that have been close to us that are not there anymore. And you're like, oh, this person I just talked to this person. Like, I just talked to her on the phone, right? So it's like, while we still have this chance, I think we owe it to ourselves to be like, okay, how do I strategize around making my relationship with my parents better? And then through that, you also get to cultivate a better relationship with your spouse or your kid or your coworker, because, boundaries are boundaries. And it's really tough sometimes standing up to the people closest to you, because it's so emotional, right?
It's so emotional. And then when you get emotional, that's where tons of problems come up.
Yeah.
You're going to say things you don't want to say. I mean, this is why this is so hard.
It is hard. And I know you are, emotionally regulated, and, we both do and take on a lot of tough conversations for our daily life. But then when it gets to our parents, I see both of us like, and, maybe that'll never go away completely, but I do think that setting boundaries helped a lot. And, it's just something that you need to have good relationships, period.
It does. And, you want to have the goal here is, how do we have a better relationship with our parents? I know the title of this is going to be like, why are we so short with our parents? But really, we're trying to have a better relationship, because there's a lot of beautiful, dynamic, beautiful benefits to having a good relationship with your parents. For anybody who's planning on having kids, it's so important to have a good relationship, because they could be very helpful in your life, especially helping watch the kids, or, being helpful for you and, whatever house projects, or, helping you with, food and things like that. I mean, it could be a beautiful dynamic. And I'll say, I just want to say that it's not like my family life is in shambles. No, right now we're actually like pretty cordial. I have a great relationship with my parents-in-law. My parents are a work in progress, but we hang out often. We have a good dynamic. I just want to be better. I need to be better with my parents, because I do know that I get really short with my parents. I've gone therapy for this. I don't know if you know, like, I've paid a lot of money to hire someone who is I think she is a first-gen Korean immigrant. And she actually was on Psychology Today. Her specialty is exactly this. And maybe one day we'll have her on. But
we should.
It's literally like immigrant parents and their relationship with their children. And I've learned so much from just my sessions with her and realizing that I think both parties, like we as children, have a part to play. And I think one of our parts is to watch When Life Gives You Tangerines, because
Sure.
we have to also be more empathetic. Control the controllables, right? And so what can we do? Be more empathetic to our parents' situation and where they grew up.
Right.
How they grew up. We grew up in the advent of technology and the internet, the World Wide Web. Our information overload is like none that they've ever experienced. And so when we have all these expectations for our parents, we have to remember that they didn't have any of that. They knew one thing, is the wives' tales, which are mostly wrong, right? Like that was their internet, right? That was their Wikipedia. The wives' tales, and also just putting food on the table. And that was like the scope of a lot of what they knew. And so I think our controllable is that we be more empathetic to our parents' situation, and then we try not to be so emotional, be kinder to our parents. You're going to have the feeling, but you know what at least I preach is like, don't follow your feelings. You're angry. Okay, you feel angry. Your mom just said something that just is the trigger that you absolutely hate. You feel anger, and then how do you act? That's what you can control, because you're not an animal. Animals work on instinct. Animals work on their feelings, but we are humans. We have a choice between the feeling and then the choice, or the action. We have a choice, right? And that's what makes us human. And it's like we need to choose to be kinder to our parents. And I'm saying this as someone who is a work in progress, trying to be kinder to our parents, not, blow up, not. And I find what's so funny? I find myself more critical to my parents than my parents were to me. Like, I'm that critical person now. Now, and then it's like one of the biggest struggles is like they don't understand technology, and so I'm just like, I get so angry. I taught you this 900 times. Why don't you get this, right?
They just I
understand. And I have to step back and be like, okay, no, they just don't understand. This is all very new to them, and one day that might happen to us, man. Like, they may have AR, and we may just not know.
Yeah, I agree. It's all real stuff. I mean, beautifully said. Everything that you said, I think it's something that we ponder about. And I think I would encourage the people at our age group or younger to think about, like, understand your parents' story. To really have, just to go back to the kids or even us, to really have healing as a community, you need to have the community. You need to have the grandpas and grandmas and uncles and aunties that you can kind of have them be your social pressure relief, And I love the fact that when we go over to, my mom's house and I see the kids running around and I'm like so tired, like I would just like relax, because like even the noise is relaxing, because I know this is my family, and I'm like sleeping in the corner. And then I think about my dad. Like, my dad, he used to work so much when we used to have holiday parties at my grandma's house. Like, he used to go in a corner and just sleep. And it's like, why is he sleeping? And it's like this 30, 40-year cycle of like, oh yeah, I feel like my dad did 35 years ago, But that's a very good feeling to have once you've worked on this community and you have facilitated the right conversations, you've done your own work to kind of understand, okay, 1, 2, 3, then it's beautiful, And I hope that's possible for, everybody out there. So.
And I feel like you have that, honestly, with your family. And, I'm working on ours, and we do have a great dynamic.
Yeah, you guys too.
And we've worked on it, and we've done a lot of boundary setting. We've done a lot of communication, but it's something that it's definitely a work in progress. And so anyway, that's why we want to talk about this. I'm sure there's so many other things, right? So many other points, but we also don't want this to get too long. So
I agree. I think that's a good end to that.
So thank you guys for watching our video. For anybody who has actually got to this point, please, please, please hit the like and subscribe. We're growing actually in our view counts. Our shorts are now getting, you know, over 1,000 views, and we post every day. So that's actually quite a lot. And our last video got over 300 views. So we are getting there, and that's exciting. And so thank you guys for watching. But again, the algorithm really loves likes and subscriptions. And so please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next video.